Hello and welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I will be your host. Now, today is going to be another quick start on the Kickstart, and a quick start on a Kickstart is quite simple. What happens is when we get a games designer who is in the middle of their Kickstarter campaign. And the reason that we're doing that is because I look at campaigns on Kickstarter sometimes and I say, oh, I'd be interested in speaking to that person. So joining me today is John D. Clair, who is currently kickstarting the rather doing very, very well Downfall. It's not only Downfall, it's Downfall Deluxified. So, hello John. Thanks for coming on the show. Hey.
Thanks for having me.
That's good. Yeah. No. Thanks for coming on. Because as I say, tonight we're going to have, or tonight, or today, or whenever anybody's listening, we're going to have a little chat about the campaign, how it's progressing, and give you a chance to kind of like tell people who are maybe not heard of Downfall before, or who are hovering over that pledge button, give you a chance to kind of talk about it a little bit more. But first of all, a couple of things we need to make everybody aware. The first thing is the reason that we do this is because we believe that there's quite simply not enough podcasts out there about board games. We have scoured the internet. In fact, we almost reached the edge of the internet. Still haven't found any other podcasts out there. And as I say, the second reason that we're doing this is because Downfall campaign's got a really good amount of attention. There's a bit of a buzz about it. It's not only funded just now, it's reached double its figures. So as I say, we've got John on today to have a chat about himself, really. So we want to find out a little bit about his history. So we want to have a little bit of a look back into the past, a kind of a peek into the present, before we head on down to his future to see what's happening there. So again, thank you, John, for coming on. It's much appreciated you taking the time out today. Do you want to maybe start off by telling us a little bit about how you got into the kind of the world of kind of pressed and coloured trees, as they would say?
Sure, yeah. And again, thanks for having me. I was always a nerdy kid and inclined towards games. I was one of those kids where, anytime a game was brought out, I would sort of gravitate towards the table, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't really get into so going way back, right? I was a kid when Pokemon was a big thing. And when Magic was first going, right? So those were a couple of my first introductions to the nerdier realm of board gaming. Yeah. I didn't end up collecting Pokemon cards, and that was sort of one of the catalysts of my initial design efforts as a 9-year-old.
Okay.
I was introduced to Pokemon cards by friends who were collecting it, but knowing my parents, I didn't expect to succeed at asking them to buy me Pokemon cards for me. So rather than trying, I decided to design my own game, which was reminiscent of Pokemon. It was little cards with monsters, but it was a dice-based battle where the monsters would fight each other with dice.
What was it called? Did you give it a name?
It's called Monster Cards. Very creatively.
I don't know, I think there's an awful lot to be said for a game that you can hear the title and then know exactly what that game is going to be about.
Right. You know what to expect. Cards with monsters.
There's too many clever names going about, and you have to really, really look into them to even discover what you're kind of getting yourself into, like Downfall, for instance. I don't know if you're maybe were young enough at the time, but there was a game called Downfall, which
I am aware of the Hasbro.
The Hasbro kind of. Oh right, have you had the letter from them?
No, I haven't gotten a notice from Hasbro.
Oh my goodness!
But yes, that one is very different than my Downfall. Yeah.
So, did you give your monsters names?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think I ended up with like 200 some unique cards, and a bunch of my friends started playing it. We'd have, get-togethers. So I was, another little fact of my childhood, I was homeschooled. Me and my sister were both homeschooled, and we lived in Los Angeles, so we actually had a pretty big group of other families that homeschooled their children. So we had a pretty wide net of similarly nerdy or dorky inclined kids, and we all played a lot of games together. And when I invented monster cards and started showing to them, and again, I'm like 9 and 10 years old, right? Yeah. Started showing these cards to the other kids. Some of them got interested in it. They would make their own cards, and the next time I would see them, they'd be like, "John, look, I made some cards. What do you think?"
Do you look at them and say, "You can't do that. You can't combine those powers kind of together"?
That cards, bro. So there was definitely those. So I had an idea of game balance, right? Yeah. Back then, I can't say I was good at it, right? But I had a notion of game balance, and a lot of the kids who played the game, their first inclination was to go make their own card, which was the best card ever conceivable, right? Yeah. Though I should give them a decent amount of credit. I saw ridiculously overpowered cards, but I also saw reasonable cards coming from other kids, right? And there was a whole element to that game of sort of silly absurdness. So a lot of people would intentionally make like the worst card ever just because it was funny.
Well, that's a worthwhile pursuit.
It was good times.
Did you have, because the Pokemon series have got a tendency nowadays to call things lots of letters and have lots of letter X's and stuff like that. So it's, the DX, EX, XX, Expo, Exo, 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 Dex, Tolamon Pokemon. Did you have, what was the kind of the most powerful card that you had at the time? Do you remember, did you have one that you went, yeah, you're my boy, and you went out and you got some foil, and you put some foil around the edges of it?
I didn't go so far as to put foil on my little cardstock hand-drawn cards.
Did you not?
No, I didn't go that far.
Were they felt tip? Did you wait until you're confident to use felt tip? Did you start off with colour pencil?
It was all colour pencils. Yep.
Was it? What was the name? What was the name of the most powerful card, or the card you were most proud of? And don't say you can't remember, because you can remember, John.
The initial most powerful card, though it was later surpassed, but it still sort of stands up as the most powerful one, was a card called Ermican. It's all one word. It's spelled, starting with an E-R-M. It's all, supposed to be like a fantasy monster name, Ermican. He was strong. By the end of the game, he was still one of the strong monsters, but there have been some that had surpassed him. Okay.
Yeah. So, did you, I take it, are these cards now gone? Are they disappeared into the kind of the history, or is it a potentiality when you're taking your partner around to meet your parents for the first time that they're going to open a box and say, and here's John's monster cards kind of thing?
My parents do not have my monster cards. I do.
Oh, you've got them still? Oh, man. Do you still have Ermican?
I'm sure I could dig them up.
Oh, wow. You've got to send me a picture of Ermican so you can use it for the artwork on the show notes. This has to happen. Oh, wow. That's amazing. See, I love this because I love people's first steps into creativity, because there's some people that like Frank West, and his first game was like he took Monopoly and put an Egyptian theme on it. And then I think Brad D. Talton was doing battling cards, but this is fantastic. Is it? I mean, so you did that. I mean, did this kind of start you on the route that you were like, well, if I'm not going to get these things, then I'm going to make myself stuff? Did that kind of start you on the route to kind of making other things then?
So that was, I got to give my mom in particular credit for that. That was sort of her philosophy. Her homeschooling philosophy was, let's not buy it, let's make it. Mm-hmm. Certainly when it came to any sort of fun type of things. So we definitely had toys, right, as kids. Yeah. But a lot of things, I think it was my sixth, is a perfect example, right? My 7th birthday, for example, was a Batman birthday party, and rather than go buy a Batman pinata, we made a paper mache pinata of the Penguin for the party, right? So stuff like that was sort of the philosophy of my mom homeschooling us, was let's make it.
Commendable thing to do. I bet you're absolutely deadly with some paste and some newspaper. If you get into a situation, you turn like B.A. Baracus used to do in the A-Team. How are we going to get out of this, John? You tell you what, you hand me that wallpaper paste.
the pinata that we made, as I recall, was actually unbreakable. Unbreakable for like 6 and 7 year olds, right? So we had like a little t-ball bat, right? And the kids at the party are taking turns whacking this thing and like barely putting a dent into it. I mean, we were probably going at it for a good 15 minutes before any candy came out. And my dad eventually, we're like, all right, whatever. My dad eventually pulls out his full size grown up baseball bat. And just in one swing, just blasts the thing into pieces, and candy goes flying across the entire parking lot.
So it's
I remember that. Those were good times.
It's like Steve Martin in Parenthood. Exactly the same thing happens. And Steve Martin ends up taking a saw to the head of this donkey and trying to take the top off of it. It's just classic Steve Martin. Moving on, we could just talk about your childhood, and we could just, doing a thing at the end for Downfall. Just go look at the link, because this is an awful lot more fun. Did you continue that during the years then? As I said, did this kind of set you off? You were always kind of constantly making games. I mean, do you have your own version of Settlers of Catan? Did you have your own version of Monopoly? As you went on, did you continue with the games, or did you go through that period where you went away and did college and stuff like that, and then found yourself back into the kind of board game thing?
So game design was always something that I was sort of drawn to. There was Monster Cards. There was another little sci-fi game I made called Space Wars.
All right.
Later, I was actually gifted a whole bunch of Magic cards from someone in the homeschool community. Their family was moving away, and the dad was a big Magic the Gathering player, and he gifted me, when he was leaving, 5,000 common cards that he had, and a handful of uncommon. So I didn't get any rares out of it, right? But
exactly. Here, let me be generous to you, boy. Oh, thanks.
No. I mean that was a huge collection. There was some commons in there that. This was back in the Urza's Saga era of Magic.
All right.
And there was some really good commons in there, right? So that sort of put me down the path of playing Magic.
Yeah.
And a handful of my friends got into it. Me and a couple of my best friends, one in particular, we came up with a game called Chaos Cards, which was like another trading card style game. And then we came up with a couple games along that lines. I was always coming up with the games. I came up with a board game later in high school. That was sort of an adventure game with a hex-based board, and you would explore tiles as you went. So none of these games were very good, but it was, and I was probably introduced to Settlers in my teen years, but I wasn't really introduced to the wider world of board games until college.
Yeah.
And really not until after college, when I sort of started exploring it myself as an adult.
Yeah.
So in college I played Diplomacy for the first time. I played Citadels for the first time.
Yeah.
Ticket to Ride, right?
Yeah, you can imagine getting invited round to come on, we're going to try some Diplomacy. Oh man, don't do cardboard. No, come on, try it, you might like it. It's kind of like peer pressure, you sitting around with a group of friends going, no, go on, move the counter, see how you feel, you might just like it, kind of thing. And it kind of grew on from there, there's a lot of people that spent their college years playing playing games like that, and it's
Dungeons
only later
Dragons,
on. Oh yeah. Did you play a lot of D&D as well?
No, I had a few friends who got into it.
Yeah.
In high school, I never got in. So I probably would have got into it if it wasn't for baseball. So my competing interests was nerdy things like board games, and then being an athlete. So I played golf, played tennis, played soccer, but primarily played baseball all the way through college, actually.
Did that baseball did that come from that day with the penguin piñata, where you kind of you got your swing from there?
It was sort of destined. My dad was a big baseball fan, so.
Oh, right, okay.
I think the day I was born, the gift he gave me as an infant, as a 1-day-year-old, right?
Yeah.
Was a baseball.
Really?
Yeah. So I was trying I was probably throwing a ball before I was walking. So in high school, I spent a lot of time playing baseball, and D&D is one of those very time-consuming games. And I played it a couple times. I enjoyed it. I'm much more inclined towards strategy than story-driven games.
Yeah.
I enjoy both. I'll happily play a good story-driven co-op game.
Yeah.
But if I'm gonna pick what game to play, it's gonna be a strategy competitive game, right?
Mm-hmm. So what kind of things have kind of I guess taken your fancy at the moment? Is there any? I mean, let's face it, you can run outside and throw a brick, and you can hit a board game nowadays. There's kind of so many of them kind of kicking about. But is there anything at the moment that you've kind of played recently that you've thought, yeah, actually, this is good fun? Or has all your time been taken up with the Kickstarter campaign?
Actually, I'm not too involved with the Kickstarter campaign. We can get into that more later. But
all right,
to your original question,
yeah,
what have I been playing a lot lately?
Yeah,
I have been playtesting a lot. I would say 75% of my gaming nowadays is either testing my games, other games that AEG is working on,
yeah,
or prototypes from other designer people that I know in the designer community in Los Angeles.
All right.
The other 25% is playing published games, which I usually try to focus on playing new games as much as possible. I play a lot of games at least once.
Okay.
And if I stopped designing tomorrow, I would play a lot more other games, right? But the design efforts, take up a lot of that time.
Yeah.
But I want to play as many other games as I can. Okay. And fortunately in LA, there's a robust gaming community. So finding game events and places and friends' houses to get games in it's not a challenge in LA.
Oh, that's cool.
Probably the new game I've played, the recently published game I've played the most lately is Bunny Kingdom.
I've heard so much about Bunny Kingdom. I
have yet to play a Richard Garfield game that I don't enjoy. So I had high expectations for this one, and it didn't let me down.
What is it with Richard Garfield? Just like, do you know what I mean? He's just must wake up in the morning, and every day in Richard Garfield's world must be about being successful and getting it right. Because I don't think I've walked away from a game and I've went, that was alright, but if I had one thing I would change that. He just seems to kind of produce nice little bits of genius after nice little bits of genius. Bunny Kingdom people have said to me what it is you go along for the cuteness, and then it bends your brain with the amount of strategy that's kind of involved in it. I mean, what's it kind of about? What is it you're liking about Bunny Kingdom at the moment?
There's a number of things to like. Primarily, probably the pace of the game, which is very fast, and the fact that most decisions in the game are not necessarily. Well, there's a handful of obvious decisions in the game, but most decisions are interesting and at least half not obvious. Right, as in every turn you draft 2 cards,
Yeah.
Right? And almost every turn, one of those two cards isn't an obvious decision, right? So it combines, and sometimes both are, right? So it combines a really quick play, which is the benefit of a drafting style game, with interesting decisions. Now that's something Seven Wonders does, right?
Yeah.
But Bunny Kingdom adds a new layer. I'm not saying I like one more than the other. They're different. And what Bunny Kingdom adds is that spatial element on the board. And of course a totally different way of actually scoring points, which I really like. It's one of those games that's really easy to pull off the shelf. We've got 3 people, we're waiting for one more to come to the game day.
Yeah.
So, he'll be here in a half hour, so let's play a round of Bunny Kingdom,
Yeah. It's quite a quick setup, quick kind of takedown kind of situation, isn't it?
And I like the bunny theme. I think it's cute and it's different. I know some people who are like, a bunny game? I don't want to play a bunny game. And then I sort of convince them to play it, and they're like, actually, this is a lot of fun. And then there's other people who are like, it's a bunny game, let's play,
And they're the ones that get kind of 50 minutes into the game, and you can see them. They're kind of crying a little bit because it's been really, really tough for them to play it. It's one of these games
so
that
I have a friend who collects a lot of games. Great guy, and we explained that it's a bunny game to him, and that it's drafting, and that it's good. And he was like, I don't want to play a bunny game. And we're like, come on, give it a try. And he's like, okay, fine. And one turn in, we were at a convention, and one turn in, he's like, does the dealer room still have copies of this? I want to buy a copy. He immediately saw the interesting decisions, and the fact that it was about bunnies no longer mattered. So
no, I don't think. Yeah, I think you get to that point where but there's lots of little components on it. It's kind of
it has lots of little bunnies.
Yeah, I mean, what's not to like about that? Is there anything that you is going to kind of coming out, or is going to be appearing in the next couple of months, that you thought, well, I need to get my hands and play a couple of rounds of that game?
I would really like to play A Fistful of Stars.
All right, okay.
If you're familiar with that one, it's the space version of A Few Acres of Snow. So
all right, okay.
I was intrigued to give that a try. We could go down the list of the 1,200 games that are coming out at Essen, and
I know, because
at least 100 of them are games I'd love to try, right? At least, probably more like 500 of them, right? So
it's kind of. Do you have quite a large collection yourself, or do you kind of control what you're kind of bringing in? Because
I have the benefit of, again, being in LA and having a lot of friends who have really large collections.
Right.
I'm also on the minimalist end of the spectrum, probably. So I don't have a massive collection, which is due partly to not living in a huge apartment, and sort of having minimalist inclinations, and then also knowing that any of the really hot big games that come out, at least one of the people I know and game with regularly is going to buy it.
Yeah.
So for example, Seventh Continent, right? I would love to give that game a try. I haven't tried it yet. I could have backed the Kickstarter. I opted not to because I already know 3 friends who own it, right?
That's the point, yeah.
Exactly. So.
Okay. And where did you, you're sitting there, you're being kind of on the designing side of things, and you're playing. So when do you decide to actually sit there? You've obviously been designing, games since you're 9, and I definitely want a picture of the Arnica so I can put it on the show notes. But when do you move from going to, did you start off on down a career path, and then went, right, let's see where this board game design thing can go? Or were you kind of constantly have you just been constantly kind of up in your game and kind of building up and more in games? How did you move from being somebody who was using colouring pencils to being somebody who's doing something like, say, Mystic Vale? How did that come about?
Yeah, so I never saw it as a choice between games or a different career.
Uh-huh.
I always figured I could pursue a practical, steady career while doing game design on the side, or one of the other sort of creative endeavors I enjoy. Game design was the first one I decided to really try to pursue, and it ended up being successful. And now it's turned into more work that I can do without going at least part-time at my day job. So I have done that.
Yeah.
But I went to school for economics, which got a job straight out of school in that field. I've been working in marketing mix modeling for almost 5 years now.
Okay.
So I've been able to pursue sort of the practical career while also doing game design on the side. The card crafting system, which I came up with originally in Edge of Darkness, and then I sold that game to AEG back in January 2015. Later, I designed Mystic Vale and sold that one, and with the handful of successes I've had lately, I've been able to do part-time at my practical job, and been doing game design full-time for about a year now. Yeah.
So
I answered your question?
It's okay. It's your
a
answer.
little rambling.
No, rambling's fine. It's your night, as I said. There isn't any questions. As I say, if you go down to question 17 of the show notes, which there aren't any, because I didn't send you any, because we don't bother with show notes. As I say, it's just like a little conversation. So are you more like the kind of the John Gilmore kind of game design thing, is that you'll design the games and then you will look at companies to kind of make the games and take it to the next stage? Because you said that about Edge of Darkness, you said that about kind of Mystic Vale. Or are you, would you see things through to the actual kind of end of production, like a kind of like a James Hudson or someone like that kind of puts the game together and then kind of puts it through kind of the Kickstarter model or the publishing model? Or are you just kind of like, here's my idea, who'd like to have it, and then hand it over to somebody else and let them kind of deal with it? Do you stay quite hands-on through the process?
I always thought self-publishing was something I might choose to do, but never was something I wanted to try to do first.
Yeah.
My first direction I wanted to go was to try to design games and then see if I could successfully pitch them to publishers and see if publishers would be up for licensing them and publishing them, so that I could continue just doing the game design part.
Okay.
So that was the route I took, and it has worked out. How much am I involved after I sell it to the publisher has completely depended on the publisher. I like being involved in the game. I usually am continuing to have ideas for improving the game. So AEG, for example, has been super receptive, right? I work very closely with them.
Yeah,
we're still developing Edge of Darkness. The game is essentially done, but I'm still working with them. Minor tweaks, new cards. So I like being involved in that whole development end. But I don't like. It's not so much that I don't like the publishing end. I would consider self-publishing at some point, if it made sense to.
Yeah.
But as long as just designing games and getting them picked up by publishers was working, happy to do that.
Because there seems to be a bit of a pressure on someone that a game designer should almost be taking everything to fruition. And I think Kickstarter has kind of, because it's so popular, it's almost kind of given people that kind of that route. This is the route that you should go, which is why you see an awful lot of kind of like for every guy that you see that's done on their 10th or their 13th campaign on Kickstarter, there's a lot of guys that they're just kind of publishing for the first time. So when you say self-publishing might be something you would do, is that just something that's that kind of thing? Well, not sure if I'd really want to actually do it, because that's a whole new skill set to learn. I mean, there's a massive difference between getting a design from, I guess, a prototype stage to getting it kind of designed, to getting it made, to then go and marketing it, to getting it all kind of made up in kind of the Kickstarter side of things, or getting it kind of published side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think the other big hurdle as an independent publisher or someone doing your first game ever, the big hurdles are a knowledge gap of how to do it, right? But if you sort of have the confidence in your game and the drive to do it, you can cover that gap yourself, right? And it's not it's just a matter of how hard you want to work, right? Okay. I think the other gap is financial, right? And that's a real block for a lot of people up until Kickstarter existed. And I think the fact that financial gap can be covered by running a Kickstarter campaign, and takes a lot of that risk up front, makes for this explosion in indie games that we're seeing from small publishers, which is great, I think. Yeah.
I mean, it's just allowed a lot of people to go from absolutely nowhere to actually taking a game and actually making something of it. There still is, though, sorry, from my experience, there's still, and the designers that I speak to, there's a lot of pressure you end up putting a lot of money into almost creating kind of like a fully fledged kind of product yourself before you put it on Kickstarter. I mean, there's a lot of games that I've seen on Kickstarter which are pretty much, they are good to go, they're ready to get filed and the file sent to the printers and they could get made because the designer has spent the time kind of getting the components kind of put together as well. Is that kind of pressure off when you're just designing? Are you able to give the ideas of how the mechanics will work? Do you put a lot of work into the kind of the prototypes yourself, or would you, I mean, is that something you would work with the AEG? You would take the idea of, you take the idea of the game to them and say, well, this is the mechanics and this is a kind of an idea to the artwork, and then would they go away and get the artist for you to kind of pick the kind of the look and feel of the game kind of thing?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is it's really with AEG in particular. It's really a matter of how much I want to be involved.
Yeah.
They're very open to listening to suggestions from me. Obviously, they're the ones footing the bill, so they get the final call, right? If I say no, I really think this is the art style we should go, and they're like, actually, everyone over here disagrees with you, John. Right? I could either put my foot down and say, well, then you don't get to publish my game, right? Or they get the final say, right?
Yeah. But you don't want to take the kind of the guy that's got the check. No, I don't want your check. I'm going somewhere. Yeah, exactly. See you later, kind of thing.
So the advantage of not being the publisher is I don't have to worry about connecting with artists and all that communication stuff. I don't have to worry about the manufacturing side.
Yeah.
I just sort of get to say what I like and don't like about the art, and then they either take my suggestions or not. Mm-hmm. I do consider myself largely responsible for the game being fun outside of the look and feel, right?
Yeah.
Or really just the look, right? So my main focus, of course, is always on the gameplay itself.
Okay. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about Downfall, because it's on Kickstarter just now. Do you want to tell, because people are obviously going to say, right, this is great. Once again, Richard, you've spent 35 minutes talking nothing about the reason that you're probably the episode title, which is going to be, which is going to have Downfall on it, and folk are going to start listening and going, okay, when do we start talking about Downfall? Do you want to explain a little bit about Downfall, what it's about, and things like that? So because we don't want the flaming torches and pitchforks at my door again.
Not again.
Not again, exactly.
Yeah, of course. So of all the games I've designed, Downfall was the one that was most designed with my gaming tastes in mind. So I sort of set out to design my favorite style game. And that's not to say I don't really enjoy Mystic Vale, right, or Edge of Darkness. But specifically 4X style games is usually my favorite type of game. So, Dudes on a Map it's an epic, longer game, plays with a big player count. We're competing for territories. We're advancing civilization. There's this sort of story arc and progression. All of that is my favorite style of game. So Downfall I designed with that goal in mind. Sometimes I start my design efforts with a mechanic in mind.
Yeah.
That's probably usually how I design, is I start with mechanics and then try to find a theme that makes sense.
Okay.
Downfall started with a style of game in mind. So I wanted to make a 4X big Civ game, right? And I wanted to. One of my least favorite thing about those kind of games is just sort of dice chucking luck. So I wanted to.
Sounds like a swear word.
So I wanted to take the random parts out, right? I always found it a very unsatisfying moment in games like Twilight Imperium, where you have a particular objective, you've spent the last round or 2 rounds planning for it, you execute it, you send your ships, you have a 80% chance of winning, and then you fail, right? And it's just and it's like, oh, okay, that was 2 hours of the game time that was squandered because of bad dice rolling, right?
Yeah.
I don't mind doing bad in games, but I want to feel like it's my fault, not right. You know what I mean? Like I want to be like, oh, I should have done that, as opposed to I did everything exactly the way I should have done it.
Yeah. Only to
so
be
I want to take
down.
that. So I want to take that element out, but otherwise still have that big epic feel.
Okay.
Downfall started as a Roman era Civ game.
Okay.
And in the design process, I specifically decided to try to differentiate it from other 4X games.
Yeah.
In multiple ways, and one of the ways I decided would be a good way to do it was with theme. So I instead pushed into the future and made it post-apocalyptic. So we're still set on Earth, or an Earth-like place.
Yeah.
So it's a map board. It's not Twilight Imperium. We're not in, there's not planets. It's all on Earth. But it's post-apocalyptic, so the apocalypse just happened, right? And the Earth's population is decimated. All that's left are bands of survivors, right? Who are now attempting to rebuild civilization from the ashes, right? But what really comes across in the game is it's not just, oh, we're post-apocalyptic, so now let's build civilization, which is just analogous to building it from scratch back in the Stone Age, right? It actually, the challenges of a post-apocalyptic future come through in the mechanics. So there's radiation fallout that is spreading across the globe.
Yeah.
And players have to continually contend with that radiation encroaching upon the borders of their territory, and have to deal with it and try to clean it up and prevent it from killing their people, right? Your food and your resources will spoil. And resources in the game are not abundant, so you have to store your resources.
Alright, okay.
Exploring the map, you find resources, but once you use them, they're gone, unless you do a very particular action, which is not very efficient unless you build certain buildings, right? So resources in the game are particularly scarce and hard to come by, because again, we're in the future, right? We're in the post-apocalyptic future. And then the other big element of the game is you have to feed your people, right? And if you don't feed your people, they will die, right?
Yeah.
So the feel of I think I successfully managed making the feel of Downfall, and some of the challenges you face in the game quite different than a lot of other 4X games. So in a lot of 4X style games, which again I really enjoy, you build up your civilization, and at some point you start running into borders with other people, and you either get into battles with them so that you can fulfill objectives, or so that you can conquer more territory, right?
Yeah.
so in Downfall, and then so in those other games, right? And then eventually, the game ends after a handful of conflicts have happened, and we rack up points, right? So Downfall is a somewhat different story arc to the game. The beginning is reminiscent, right, of that style, where you're expanding, you're building up, you're getting technologies, you're sort of planning for the future. But what you're planning for isn't like an invasion into an opponent necessarily, or to fulfill particular objectives. You're actually planning to survive the second half of the game. So the game has an event track in it that has certain events paced out during the game, and these events are things like fallout, where the radiation will spread, or food allocation and spoilage, where your resources spoil and you have to feed your people. So the events are primarily bad, and they're paced out such that the first half of the game, there's a handful of them, but they're not going to be all that terrible. But they ramp up and get much worse in the second half of the game, and especially towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
So the first half of the game is very much about planning to survive the second half of the game. And when you start having conflict in the game, it's usually not about, I'm trying to take your territory because I want your territory. It's usually, you have food and I don't, right? So I need to come get your food because I've used up all mine, and I don't have the actions to be able to generate more food right now. So my best way of feeding my people is going to be taking your food. And that's the catalyst actually for a lot of battles in the game is, my city is about to get blown up because radiation fallout is spreading, and I'm out of the resources I need to clean it up. So I can either become nomadic and head to the center of the board where other people have some stuff because my home is going to blow up, or I can try to stay here and fight it off, but it doesn't look good. So you know what? I'm coming because I got to leave my home, right? And so the second half of the game plays out very differently than a lot of 4X games do. And you spend the first half of the game planning for that. So it has a very different feel on the overall. I think I skipped over what the core mechanic of the game is.
I was because I'm looking at the pictures of the board on the Kickstarter while you're talking. So
the core mechanic of the game is what I call action drafting.
Yeah.
Everyone has a deck of action cards that they start with at the end of the game, and your action cards are almost all the same as other players. Your initial deck. But you have a faction leader card in your deck that has a special unique power. How it works is you're going to have a hand of 4 cards, and each card represents a different action that you can do. So, for example, you could move, or you could gather resources, or you could research a technology, or you could build buildings and construct airships and equip your survivors, or clean up radiation. Right. So each card is an action you can do. And you have a 4-card hand, and each turn, everybody will simultaneously choose one of their 4 cards and place it face down on the table. And then they'll pass their other 3 cards to the player on the left.
Oh, right, okay.
And once everyone's chosen their action card, everyone reveals their action card at the same time, and then executes whatever that action was. Most of them execute on the board. Most of the time, everyone can just resolve simultaneously. Occasionally, people will have to go in turn order, which is then indicated by an initiative number on the card they chose. So, for example, if me and the person to my right both played a movement action, him and I would want to go in initiative order, right? Whereas everybody else who just gathered and built and researched, they can just sort of do their things first, and then we go in movement order. So, most of the time, everyone just goes at the same time, so the pace of the game is really fast, even with the full complement of 6 players. You have a game that plays really quick. There's not really a lot of downtime in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So once everyone's done their action, you then take the 3 cards that were passed to you. You draw the top card of your deck, and then you repeat the process. And there's a couple caveats to that. In everyone's draw deck, there's a couple winter cards. Winter cards are when you draw it, you immediately discard it and then redraw a new card. And then for every winter card that's drawn each turn, the event track advances 1 space.
Oh,
right? So that sort of dictates the pacing of the game. When you get to the end of the event track, the game's over. And as you go along the event track, different events will occur. So so players can see what event is coming. It's not like you randomly get hit by something. You know what the next event is. You don't know exactly when it's going to happen because it's going to depend on the card draw. You can sort of guesstimate. I think it's probably going to happen within 1 to 3 turns, right? But you don't know for sure. So that advances the event track, and then certain events will occur, and we have to deal with them. Moreover, everyone has a 2-card reserve. So when you're choosing a card to play each turn, you can play one of your 2 cards from your reserve instead of from your hand.
Okay.
And then what you would do is you would take one of the 4 cards from your hand and put it in your reserve to replace the card that you played. So you always have 2 cards in your reserve, 1 card you're playing, and 3 cards you're passing.
Is that to kind of avoid the situation where you do get in a lot of these card drafting games? I'm thinking Terraforming Mars, I'm thinking about you, where you can end up with a card you're just like, I can't do anything with this at all. So it's good to have kind of something in the background that you can go, actually, I can do this. Instead,
exactly. So you can always so good players in Downfall will be using the reserve 60% of the time, 60 to 80% of the time they'll be playing a card out of their reserve, right? Because your reserve allows you to plan and pace out the actions you want, right? So the sequence of actions you do often really matters, right? I want to gather resources, then I want to play a build action, right? And then once I've built things like airships, I would like to move and explore with them, right? So I want to do these actions in this sequence, but because it's a draft, there's no guarantee each hand you'll get the cards in that sequence that you want. But you can use your reserve to plan it, right? So if I've planned where I have a gather in this hand, I have a movement in my deck. All right, as long as I get a build on the next draw, I can do it in sequence, right? So you're always planning multiple turns in advance using that reserve, and it gives you a lot more control. So you're usually not screwed by the draft. It's you might not have planned it out right, and that's what leaves you with nothing. Every now and then, of course, everyone shuffled all of one particular action to the bottom of their deck, right? So that particular action becomes a little scarce. Every card has a minor action on it, which is sort of a lame version of one of the regular actions. So if you're really tight and you really need to do a particular thing, you can usually use a minor action to do it, and it just won't be as efficient.
Okay.
So that's a decent overview of what to expect in the game.
And do you reveal when you're going out? Are you turning over the tiles as you go out in there as well? So it's kind of a little bit random, but the fact is that affects everybody that's on the board, as opposed to, as you said, kind of avoiding the horrors of this random dice that could probably really wreck a player's chances. If it's a bad tile, then it's going to affect everybody particularly, instead of potentially affecting kind of one player instead.
So probably, so what you're saying there is actually probably the most random and luck driven part of the game is everyone starts with 4 hexagon spaces as their opening territory. And actually in this game, each hexagon space can be multiple spaces. So it's not actually a hexagon map, because one hexagon may have 1 to 3 spaces on it. So you're not always moving in a hex grid. Doesn't end up actually working that way. But you start with that territory, and everything else on the board is unexplored at the start of the game. And as you explore, as you move into an unexplored space, it reveals, and then you can now use that territory. And that was an interesting design choice for me. I recognize that there's some spaces are better than others, right? I find that it's more interesting if some spaces are better than others, but it also means, one player might get a couple not as good spaces. There's no spaces in the game where like you move into it and it's terrible, you die, right? All spaces have something useful that you can find. But maybe you're like, I don't have any territory with this particular type of resource. I would really like to explore and find one, and maybe you don't find one, right? So you might have to research a technology that allows you to convert resources instead, right? So that's probably the biggest aspect of luck in the game, is the exploration part.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the reason I kept it in was because it's a lot of fun, right? Like talking with playtesters, I really enjoy it, and it's one of those things where it's not like you move in and you get randomly screwed, right? You actually want to use your early game exploration to scout out the territories around you, which then inform your decisions of where should you be moving later, right? So you're not stuck with what you get so much. You want to scout out what's near you early, usually, and then use that new information you got from exploring the nearby territories to determine the direction in which you want to expand your civilization.
Yeah, no, I think, randomness is good in certain things as long as it kind of balances out. I think I have more of an issue with randomness when it's kind of like maybe at a roll of a dice when it's affecting one player and that's it, and they can be kind of completely made completely inert by their dice roll. They become completely kind of powerless because of that.
Yeah, I think my least favorite type of luck is when it feels like you have no control over it. So if you know what the risk is you're taking, and then you choose to take it anyway, or something random happens and then you have a choice to make based on that random what happens, as opposed to just randomly getting dealt a bad hand, right?
Well, I'm getting feelings of the old real-time strategy games, your old kind of Command and Conquer, and even Dune from years and years ago, where you would have the map, you wouldn't know what was on there, and it was your job to kind of go ahead and explore the map and see what came up in terms of resources or challenges and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting to me.
That was Age of Empires for me. Yeah, I played a lot of Age of Empires.
Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. How long is it going to take for a game? I mean, when I've spoken to people that have talked about other 4X games, your Eclipses of this world and things like that, they've been sitting down for kind of like hours at a time. And for some people that's fine, but for some people, if they have a game night, sitting up until 3 o'clock in the morning isn't the most attractive thing for them to do. So what's the kind of the playtime going to be like on Downfall?
Yeah, so Downfall is definitely a main event type of game. It's not what do we want to play now? Oh, let's play a quick game of Downfall, right? It plays 3 to 6 players. And the difference in length between the number of players isn't huge because of the fact that everyone resolves simultaneously their actions. So the 3-player game isn't all that much shorter than the 6-player game. It definitely does play shorter, but it's not like a 1-to-1 relationship.
Okay.
The gameplay, your first game is going to be probably longer than 3 hours.
That's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah. So depending on your group, I mean, I have played a 5-hour game of Downfall with a slow group of 6 people. But I've also played an hour and a half long game with a fast group.
Yeah.
So neither of those cases is exemplary of what you should reasonably expect. Probably 2.5 is going to be the average game length. Which
isn't bad, because I mean, if you're looking at, Scythe, games like that, I mean, that's, you can, if you're taking your, if you're kind of sitting down, relaxing, enjoying, taking your time, your average game is going to take, of this, similar ilk, is going to take around about 2.5 hours. It's when a game is, let's break for lunch, kind of thing. That's kind of, I don't know if I've got the concentration to sit down for a 7 or 8 hour game. I'd probably get bored and they would find me kind of wandering off kind of thing.
I actually really enjoy super long games. I don't mind a 7 or 8 hour game now and then. Downfall used to be, earlier in the design process, was more like a 4 hour average length game.
Yeah.
And I actually really enjoyed that version of the game, but that was back before anybody knew my name. Like that was before Mystic Vale or Edge of Darkness, right?
Really? All right.
I made the choice to do some things that would shorten the length of the game in order to get it more in a range that I felt would more likely get picked up by a publisher. So I actually made that choice to make the game more accessible for publishers. It's a kind of hard sell, and Downfall was a hard sell to begin with. As sort of a no-name designer, you imagine pitching a game like Downfall, which comes in this big box. There's a bazillion components, and I say, this is a 4X game that plays 3 to 6 players in 2.5 to 4 hours, right? And publishers look at you and they're like, great, sorry,
Thanks.
it's too big for us, right? We don't know who you are, and we don't have time to try this because there's a million other great games we want to look at also.
Exactly. Thanks for dropping by, John, isn't it? Is it John? Yeah, John, leave your card at the desk, and and we will probably put it in the bin.
So that's actually, that's more or less what I got with Downfall. I pitched it to a bunch of publishers. I only ever played it. So, the goal of pitching to publishers is to get them to actually sit down and play your game, because then you don't have to explain to them why it's good, right? Yeah. It speaks for itself. They don't have to believe you anymore, right? So I pitched it to a whole bunch of publishers. Most of them, I made a really nice looking prototype, right? I usually try to do that when I'm pitching games. And most publishers, when I explain the mechanics to them, they're like, this sounds really interesting, but it's too big for us. So we're gonna have to pass. The only two people who ever played it was Queen Games, and the person who actually makes the decisions about what to publish wasn't the one who played it.
Right.
A person who then recommended me to that person played it. She really liked it, and she thought Queen, it might be something that the decision makers of what games to publish at Queen Games would do, but he also said, this looks too big for us, and didn't get a chance to play it. And then the only other publisher that actually played it was Tasty Minstrel, and they played it back-to-back nights with me at Board Game Geek Convention. And then the day after the convention, they were like, "Yeah, we really like this game. We want to publish it."
Is it difficult? Well, it must be difficult pitching. You're almost like in a Dragon's Den type situation, because in terms of the difference of a Kickstarter, you are generally expected to have kind of like reviews done and videos done and kind of playthroughs done, whereas for you the pitch must be an awful lot harder, because you can't really refer somebody to YouTube, can you? Because it's kind of like, I kind of need to kind of keep maybe some of the mechanics hidden. You're needing to protect your IP, but at the same time you kind of want to demonstrate it to people at the same time. So you're not going in with maybe half the collateral that usually a Kickstarter campaign would kind of have, I guess. So that must make it difficult. Do you approach it kind of like, do you end up sending out a lot of letters all the time? Is half your job kind of constantly on the kind of the pitch and having business meetings with people and doing the convention circuits and stuff like that as well?
So I actually do a lot less pitching to publishers now. But it's been virtually none for the last year. I've been working pretty closely with AEG. I'm designing a handful of games specifically for them.
Okay.
So I'm not on the path of pitching games lately. But I actually really enjoyed pitching games when I did. Especially when I felt really confident about the game. Edge of Darkness was a great example of me enjoying pitching, because I knew I had something really cool there, right? With the card crafting mechanic. I felt really confident about that game and about the fact that people would be interested, and that played out, right? Virtually every person I pitched it to either said, yes, we're interested, or wow, that's a cool idea, but we don't know how to make that game.
Okay.
Because the plastic cards and stuff, right?
Yeah. So when you're pitching to people, do you send them like the rule book and some basic kind of mechanics and some artwork and stuff like that, or do you, or do you kind of just go around and arrange a meeting with a copy of the game under your arm?
It's both. What I found the most success with was messaging publishers in advance of a game convention, asking them if they would have any representatives at that game convention that were looking at prototypes, and then getting who those names were, and even better, a time to actually stop by and pitch the games to them.
Yeah.
To make that successful, I would make sell sheets, and I would usually try to make really nice looking sell sheets of really nice looking prototypes. So I'd get, I'd spend some time on the graphic design and make it look good. And then in advance, I'd message the publishers, ideally set up some meetings to show them, and then go to the convention and, try to execute on those pitches. That's how Downfall got picked up by Tasty Minstrel Games. I knew them in advance. I set up the meeting before the convention, and then had a chance to actually play it with them. Yeah. That was at Board Game Geek Convention, which the advantage there is it's a good convention for actually sitting down and playing the games with the publishers.
Okay.
It's also
cool?
Yeah.
No, sorry. Go ahead. No. What were you
I was just going to say that was also the way I got Edge of Darkness picked up by AEG, was messaged a handful of publishers in advance, again, of Board Game Geek Convention. This was the year after I sold Downfall. And set up appointments with them, sat down, actually got to play the game. That was a fun convention because just the response to that particular game was strong, and as at the time a no-name designer who was still looking for his first break.
Yeah.
I had sold Downfall at the time, but it hadn't come out yet. So it was fun to see all of these publishers be like, "Wow, this is really cool,"
Yeah, I mean, is that a real buzz? Is to actually not just have somebody going, "Oh, this game looks cool" online, but actually sitting down with someone in front of you for the first time and seeing them, the little kind of flash in their eyes as they get the game and they start to move from, consciously try to learn the rules to actually settling in and really enjoying it. I mean, is that a real reward to kind of like be doing the pitching side of things, to see somebody's kind of like going, yeah, this is fun, and not only them going from this is fun to, oh my goodness, we could actually sell this game and it would be, it would do really, really well. Is that kind of, is it kind of cool when you kind of see that? It must be.
So the whole first half of that is just design process in general. It is very satisfying to spend a long time working on a game, build a nice prototype, develop it over a while, and just those times when you sit down with a bunch of people and watch them play your game and watch them have a great time, that's satisfying. And then pitching to a publisher and watching a publisher who you know is a good publisher and could do a great job with your game, also sitting down and really having a good time with it, and that's a good, and like thinking, okay, this could work, I might have a bite here. It's a good feeling.
That's cool. You mentioned that earlier on that you haven't had much dealings with the new Downfall, the Downfall Kickstarter. Did you have was the Deluxified idea, was that something that you brought in, or was that something that was brought in by TMG?
TMG suggested it a while back, and I was my response was, at this point they'd had the game for a year and almost 2 years, and my response was, yeah, Deluxified sounds great as long as it doesn't delay the game being released too much. They thought it would delay it, and then it got delayed anyway. So a year later, it still hadn't come out. They still hadn't had it ready to go. So I told them, you know what? And a year later, at that point, Mystic Vale had come out, So I wasn't sort of anxiously waiting for my first game to really come out yet.
No.
So at that point, I was like, you know what, TMG guys, if it's going to take an extra year or year and a half to make this Deluxified, that's fine, right? You know, I'm not as anxious to see this game get out there yet. I still, of course, I'm excited to see it get out there. I am happy to wait to get the better version of the game out there, or the nicer components-wise version of the game out there.
Okay. And do you have a copy of the Deluxified version then?
I don't yet.
Oh,
I will, but I don't think anybody has a copy of the Deluxified version yet. We don't know what
it's going to depend on. Looks like.
It's going to depend on what all the stretch goals end up being.
I suppose.
TMG has a handful of copies of, a prototype version of the game with just cardboard bits, but
that must be exciting.
I haven't got to play with that one yet either.
Oh man. But then I suppose when I was speaking to John Gilmore, he was talking exactly the same thing when he was talking about a couple of games he was involved in. It's like, well, I haven't played the game because I'm waiting to get the final version of the game like everybody else is, because I do occasionally get copies, but usually I'm waiting for the first production run, and I get sent one maybe a couple of weeks before everybody else.
Yep.
But I'm still kind of waiting to kind of I'm waiting for that kind of the ring on the doorbell with a postman with a lovely kind of big box of goodness.
Yep. Oh, it was super exciting when I got Mystic Vale for the first time.
Yeah.
Which was, what was that? It was maybe a month and a half before it was released. Maybe only a month. So I got my final production copy, one or two copies of it, like a month before it came out, right? That was awesome to get. So.
And Mystic Vale's went on to be, there's a lot of people that have a lot of love for Mystic Vale out there. It's a well liked and well played game. People have a lot of nice things to kind of say about that. Is that kind of cool seeing that when you're out there, and do you are you the type of person that kind of goes and jumps onto the Mystic Vale kind of board on Board Game Geek to see what kind of people have been saying about the game, or help out with questions, or?
I didn't used to. I've decided I wanted to stay away from that, but I've decided more recently that I do want to try to be involved in responding to comments if people have questions especially about gameplay, but other stuff. So yeah, I've looked at comments, I've responded to stuff, I've watched reviews of the game. It's listening to positive reviews is very satisfying. For example, Tom Vassell gave it a stellar review. He loved it.
Tom Vassell wanted. Yeah, he loved it.
That's super satisfying.
Yeah.
I think I've heard this from other people, creators. It's the negative comments. One negative comment sticks with you as much as 30 positive comments, right? Like, so there's always those few comments where the guy's like, this is the dumbest game of the year,
yeah,
this is just a stupid gimmick, with no real gameplay, And then the next three comments are like, this is my favorite game of the year, but it's like that negative comment that,
the sarcasm one. But then, you're not tempted to reply, still working full time in your job, kind of, I'm just, part time now.
No, I think, so, if it's a totally unconstructive negative comment, I think the best response is just to ignore it.
Yeah.
If it's a constructive negative comment with sort of I don't know why they made this decision, I didn't like this part of the game, and I'm not sure why they didn't do it this way.
Yeah.
Type of thing, that I might respond if I have a good response to it.
Yeah.
I don't expect everyone to like all of my games, right? You can have great taste in board games and also not like a couple of my games, right? So that's fine. You
said like you're saying that through gritted teeth. That's fine. You keep your board game taste. That's okay. I don't care. No. But no, it is. It's. Do you know what I think? the worst thing about being in that situation is the game's out there, and it's not like you can say, do you know what, you're right, let's recall all, 47,362 copies that have gone out there and just change it just for you, and then we'll send it back out again. You're kind of stuck going, well, I don't know. I mean, I've seen games that have made changes to stuff using kind of expansions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And try to... I guess there's obvious kind of changes you can make to some games. I was listening to a podcast today that were talking about Battlestar Galactica, and they say they've played the game with all the expansions, but then they've gone back to playing the game without the expansions just to get the kind of the pure vanilla feel of the game, because sometimes kind of the expansions and slight errata and changes in the rules kind of have taken away from kind of what they liked about the game, kind of like in the first place. You've got expansions for Mystic Vale, is that right?
Yeah, the third one is actually, I think, on sale for the first time this week at Essen.
Oh, okay.
It's going to be the third small box expansion.
So that's the third expansion for Mystic Vale, available at Essen if you're listening just now. Is there going to be a stand there that people can go?
AEG has a booth there, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's AEG, you'll be able to find it if you
yeah,
and pick up the game. Because they'll probably be selling Mystic Vale there as well.
Oh yeah, of course.
Of course. So go to Essen. In fact, just go to Germany now.
Fly to Germany.
Fly to Germany. Get your tickets.
So that you can buy a copy of Mystic Vale.
Make John very happy. So when they report back and say, well, how did it go? And they say, Mystic Vale just sold out in seconds. I don't know, people kept talking about this weird Scottish guy doing his podcast. And then I felt strangely kind of drawn to go ahead and buy. Oh. I was buying Mystic Vale. Have you not already got Mystic Vale? Yes, I have. I don't know. I just felt the need to go out and buy another. And can I buy another copy? I mean, for you, kind of going forward. I mean, are you just going to see what happens with the Downfall kind of campaign on Kickstarter? Or is that you kind of, your design stuff is done, you're just waiting to see where it hits in terms of the stretch goals and stuff? Is there stretch goals out there which mean you'll have to jump in and help with the design stuff, or is that already being kind of taken care of?
So I actually sent them, like a year ago, a bunch of potential stretch goal content. Which they may or may not use. I haven't seen any of it put up on Kickstarter yet.
Okay.
I'm mostly just monitoring it. If people post comments that are specifically about gameplay, I'll try to respond to them.
Okay.
But I don't really have any, I shouldn't be commenting and responding to people's questions about production or components and stuff, right?
No.
That's in TMG's ballpark.
Yeah. Okay. And what's next for you now? I mean, are you looking at Bunny Kingdom and saying, right, I'm gonna do Squirrel Valley. That's my next game. Or are you already
I like that name. That's a good name. Squirrel Valley.
Squirrel Valley. The battle for the nuts.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. All right, maybe that'll be a game. I'll have to give you credit for it if that ends up being.
It's an area control game, and the idea is that you have the choice of taking over. One square will get you one tree. If you take over maybe 2 squares, it gets you slightly bigger trees. But the danger is that obviously having more squares available for the trees means that you've got more chance of another squirrel landing on a space and potentially taking control of it, because you've got to defend your area. On top of that, you've got things to deal with, but there's a time scale on it, because the game will last kind of maybe 10 rounds, and the last 4 rounds will be based where it's getting colder to winter, so the number of nuts that are available will drastically reduce. You've also got predators to deal with depending on how you decide to move. You can move through the treetops if you want to, but you've got a danger of being attacked and taken down by owls, or you can move along the ground where you've got a fox danger. There you go, there's your game.
You've clearly thought this out.
I just made that up on the spot. Yeah, I should maybe try. Nah, I don't.
Yeah, try your hand at game design. There you go.
I don't want to do that. But what's next for yourself? I mean, as I say, you said you've got prototypes kind of you sit down, I mean, have you got, I take it you must have about 15 games kind of sitting there. Do you just wake up in the middle of the night and go, it's about, kind of thing, and start writing stuff down? Or are you quite controlled in what you decide you're going to take forward? Because it doesn't sound like the games that you do are kind of just very quick, casually type stuff. It sounds like there's a lot of thought and everything like that behind them.
So it really depends. Specifically, what I've got next coming is Edge of Darkness. That's the big project on the horizon that I've got, nearing its conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So Edge of Darkness, which is coming out from AEG, it was the first card crafting game I designed. It's sort of a medium weight Euro, sort of richly thematic Euro, I would say.
Uh-huh.
That one's going to be on Kickstarter in February.
All right, okay.
And we're hoping that gets a big bump from Mystic Vale. I know there's a handful of people who really like Mystic Vale and want to see more card crafting games, and then there's the handful of people who Mystic Vale wasn't what they wanted, but they really liked the card crafting concept. And this Edge of Darkness might be more in their wheelhouse.
Okay.
So we'll hope that it gets a bump there. So that'll be on Kickstarter in February. That's the big task that I've been working on. Working on the rulebook for that. Working on some expansion content for it.
Might need to get you back on. Might need to get you back on then.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah,
you do that.
In terms of game ideas and what I work on a regular basis. You've
got a squirrel game coming out.
Yeah, so starting tomorrow I'll be working on Squirrel Valley. So it depends, right? So this week I was actually building out prototypes for 3 different children's games that I've had in my mind for a while.
Yeah.
I've had 2 of them are games. Actually, all 3 are games I've worked on in the past, and I'd like to package them all up, and pitch them to some of the bigger publishers like Mattel, and Hasbro first, and then likely I won't get any bites because it's hard to get a yes from companies that big, and then I'll maybe pitch them to some of the smaller children's game publishers.
Yeah.
Last night, so 2 weeks ago, I was at Vancouver at Shut Up and Sit Down's little convention, the little convention they ran, which was great. And I was up there I got a Airbnb with a couple of the AEG guys, and we were brainstorming game ideas, and one of them sort of got my wheels spinning. So last night I was lying in bed awake for an hour thinking of that game, right? that happens on a regular basis. So,
oh no.
So that might be something I will prototype out in the near future. And those are the type of things where you think about it for a while, it sounds good in your head, and you prototype it, and then 50% of it works.
Yeah.
Sometimes 80% of it works, right?
Yeah.
So I have a game that's going to be out also from AEG in March, and this one's not being Kickstarted, it's going straight to retail. A little dice game called Space Base.
Okay.
It'll remind you most of Machikoro.
Okay.
And that was one of those games where I had the idea, I prototyped it in a day because it was easy to make. And then it was just great the first time I played it. I was like, wow, this is, it's one of those, it was one of those rare times where it sort of worked right out the gate. It was of course not balanced. So over the next 8 months or so, I kept working on it and designing it and tweaking it and rebalancing it. But it was one of those games where, okay, I don't need to make any major changes to this game right away. This seems to be working pretty well. And every now and then that happens.
All right. Okay. I'm conscious that I've taken up far too much of your time.
It's much later for you than it is for me. It's middle of the day here.
Fine.
So.
No, it's fine. No. I really appreciate all the time that you've given us today. But if people want to keep an eye on you on the interwebs, web nets. Where can we find you, Mr. John D.
Probably
Clair?
the best way would be to follow me on Twitter.
Okay.
My Twitter handle is just John D. Clair. No spaces or dashes or anything. Just all one word, John D. Clair.
Okay, cool. And what we'll do is we will put the links in the show notes regarding Downfall,
Great.
Mystic Vale. Anything else you want to give me over, we'll make sure that we put them in the show notes so that we have notes to show, as we say. Downfall looks, from what you say, it sounds sounds like good fun. My kind of jam. So if you're into that thing, then certainly go and check it out. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, go to Google, search for We're Not Wizards. You'll find us you'll find our website, we'renotwizards.com. We've got Twitter as well, We're Not Wizards. Guess what? YouTube, We're Not Wizards Tabletop Podcast. We're there as well. You'll find us on all the normal podcast catchers. So you've got Stitcher and Spreaker and Acast. There's a lovely one called Podknife who are up and coming and growing and are worthwhile kind of looking at. You've obviously got your big one of this world, which is your Apple Podcasts. If you like what you've heard tonight, for some reason, if people go on and press the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts under our show, then it means it's sunny for the next 3 days. So go ahead and do that if you'd like to see some sunshine in lovely October. If you like us even more, please feel free to drop us a rating or a review. As we say regarding kind of ratings and reviews, don't give us a 10 because that'll make us big-headed, but don't give us a 1 because that'll make us cry. But give us something in the middle, like a 5, because it's average, and we are decidedly average. But the person who's not been average today is the rather wonderful, the rather amazing, the rather spending far too much time talking to me, Mr. John E. Clair. So, John, thank you again for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a good conversation. I enjoyed this.
That's good. There's only 2 more things to do, and the first thing is to remember that we are many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, John?
Nope, unfortunately.
It's not unfortunately, it's good.
It's good.
They don't need any more wizards. We don't need any more wizards.
We don't need more wizards. I don't know. No. Depending on what wizardly powers I have, it might not be so bad. But I don't have any, so I don't know.
I always say, I like the words of Terry Pratchett, which is a wizard's staff has a knob on the end. Basically. And the next thing to do is to say goodbye. So it is a goodbye, as I say, from the other fantastic Mr. John D. Clair. Say goodbye, John.
Goodbye. Thanks so much.
No, it's been a pleasure. And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll 6s. If you fancy fighting against radiation, going exploring, finding new resources, battling other players, and flipping over hexagonal tiles while not having to worry about the randomness of dice, then maybe check out Downfall. If you fancy something a bit more mysterious, then there's Mystic Vale. And obviously coming soon, next year, which is only actually a couple of months away, is going to be Edge of Darkness. And we will obviously keep you lovely people aware of these things as they are out there in the future. But until the next time, goodbye.